Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We're just going to get started in 1 or 2 minutes to let people jump on. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started while people jump on. Thank you all so much for being here with us. My name is Taylor Maag, and I am the Director of Workforce Development Policy for the Progressive Policy Institute, also known as PPI. I would like to welcome everyone to the second webinar in our Future of High School series. This series is done in partnership with the 74 and PPI's Reinventing America's Schools team and the New Skills for a New Economy project. 2 weeks ago, we kicked off the series highlighting the Academy of Health Science in Maryland and the school's unique partnership with PG County Community College, Bowie State University, building college and career paths in health, education, and other in-demand fields. This week, we are very excited to highlight Purdue Polytechnic High School. I'll let our esteemed panel provide more detail about this school, but PPHS was founded by Purdue University and the city of Indianapolis in partnership with community, industry, and academic leaders. PPHS prepares students to succeed in technical STEM-related post-secondary programs and high-tech careers. This is, as we know, increasingly important today as we want to ensure that we close equity gaps in STEM-related industries, and we also solve persisting labor shortages in these critical jobs. Our panel of experts will dive into the success of PPHS, its unique and innovative model, and how it's helping to develop strong college and career pathways for students. Additionally, panelists will discuss the school's expansion in Indiana and ways federal and state policy can facilitate further replication and scale. This conversation is critically important as it will help inform the necessary reforms to ensure our nation's education system creates paths to greater economic opportunity for America's young people. Before we get started, we're going to do a quick poll to see who's with us today in this virtual room. And as you all are answering the poll, I will introduce our wonderful speakers today. Awesome. Thank you all for filling that out. So we have Jo Napolitano, Senior Reporter for the 74. Thank you, Jo, for being here.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Keeanna Warren, who's the CEO of Purdue Polytechnic High School. Hi, Keeanna. We have Dr. Gary Bertoline, the Senior Vice President for Purdue Online, who also works on learning and innovation at Purdue University. Hey, Gary. We have Ann Sullivan, who's a former school board member for Indianapolis Public Schools, and also is a former Indiana House member serving the state. Ann, very excited to get your perspective today. And last but definitely not least, we have Raina Maiga, who's a rising junior at PPHS, among many, many other things. So I'm very excited for her to share more about what she's working on and doing currently as a student at the school. So thank you all so much for being here. I want to say these panelists have a lot more in their titles and background that they will weave in throughout their responses today. And with that, we'll present the survey responses briefly before we get started. Awesome. So we have a nice mix of folks with us today. I'm excited. Good. We'll have a lot of diverse perspective. I will say, while we don't have a chat function for our audience, we do have a Q&A. So if you have questions throughout our conversation, we'll make sure to keep track and try to elevate them throughout the dialogue. Wonderful. Thank you all. Okay, well, let's dive in and get started. Jo, you're going to be my first question today. You are a senior reporter, as I mentioned, for the 74. You are looking at innovations in education across the country. Since this webinar is themed around the future of high school, can you speak to some of the futuristic things that you're seeing and trends you'd like to elevate that really align with efforts happening at PPHS?
I would say the greatest trend among new successful programs is appealing directly to kids' interests. Self-directed learning, passion projects, a hand-on experience, all of those things are on point. A focus on STEM, of course, as the world moves toward a greater focus in robotics and things like that. But I think an even greater, far more important theme than what kids are studying even is recognizing that all children have talent and potential. And that sounds like a very old school, obvious notion to many people. Of course, all kids have talent, all kids, have the potential to do something great. But that's actually a pretty revolutionary idea here when we apply it to education. We often exclude enormous swaths of this country, whether they live in urban areas, rural areas, whether their zip code is poor, they don't look like what we think a STEM child would look like. And we really have done an outstanding job of excluding so much of this country from those opportunities. And so I think that's by far the most important thing that I'm seeing successful programs do. Schools are widening their scope. They're making quality of programming available to all kids. They are, in some cases, adding things like music and art as considerations as to who could be invited into gifted and talented programming. And they're testing, which of course they always should have been, newcomer students who do not speak a single word of English to look at their talent using nonverbal tests, basically computerized spatial relations programming to see if the child has the type of agility that they're looking for. There is no successful future for this country that does not include every child of every racial background, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, disabled, twice exceptional. As I mentioned to you, we definitely need, and I think great schools are doing this to transform what we think of as a successful child or a child with potential. And I mentioned to you earlier, and I speak on this all over the country because I've written a book on immigrant children. I was actually born in Bogota, Colombia, and abandoned at a bus stop, placed in an orphanage, and almost died of starvation there. It was only randomly I was adopted to Long Island, went to a solid public school, got a nearly full ride to Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. And when I was 40, a bunch of years ago, 7 years ago now, I was paid to attend Columbia University as a Spencer Education Fellow. I am quite certain nobody thought as I was in that orphanage that any of those things that I laid out would happen. But when I see kids coming across our border, when I see kids, whose parents have addiction issues like my father did, or who come from very socially, economically diverse backgrounds, who have crime occurring in their home, who have difficult things going on, and we just write these children off, and an enormous loss to us spiritually, practically, skill level wise. We are missing out on the talent of kids who have so many gifts. And so I feel like that is far more important than what kids are studying or even how, is the fact that really good schools with solid programs are recognizing that all kids have talent, and they're doing the things to mine that talent. It's funny, when I was in high school, one of my English teachers at the middle school level was promoted or moved to the high school and became editor-in-chief of our school paper. And she knew I was a very good writer. And she suggested to me that I join the school paper. And I did. And that's how I got into Northwestern. That's how I got into Columbia. That's how I wrote for the New York Times when I was 24. That's how I did, all of the things that I ended up doing. I feel like great schools, and a teacher told me this, I did not make this up. A teacher told me this, so I'm not taking credit for this, but they said, in great schools, teachers operate as talent scouts rather than deficit detectors. And I feel like we really need to embrace that, put that in our soul, that every child who comes across has a talent. And I kind of think of them as like a kind of block of clay, and we're just chipping away, trying to help them reveal their talent. And I hope we have a world one day when teachers are regularly saying to a kid, you're a great speaker, you should look at the law, or you're outstanding with numbers, you could be, an entrepreneur in some way, start your own business somewhere, you're great on social media, you could work in PR and make a heck of a lot of money, by the way. There are skills our children are bringing to us right away. And we're, schools that are not doing kids a service are kind of like putting out that light on that candle. And it's so heartbreaking. We think that talent looks like one thing. Does talent look like an orphanage in Bogota, Colombia? Because I think it does. And I think that schools that are in the right mindset think it absolutely does. It's funny, when I was lecturing on this, and I said something on Instagram about, I bet I'm the only kid who got this outstanding education coming from the orphanage that I did. And I got a message on Instagram from a woman who said, I was in that same orphanage 4 years behind you, and I am a Cornell educated civil rights lawyer. And it just, it shakes my soul, because it's like, wow, you look at, there is talent everywhere. Every single place you see a child, that child is carrying a talent with them. So yes, we're looking at STEM. Yes, we're looking at robotics. Yes, we're looking at, themed schools. And I'll talk about this later. Some phenomenal schools out there focused on robotics or on maritime studies or on this, that, and the other. But the commonality that any great program has is recognizing the talent in all kids, inviting these kids, looking for these kids, growing that talent, encouraging them every single day. and really blowing up the model that talent looks like a white suburban child.
Jo, I'm so happy you kicked us off because I think your passion is very clear for this work and it sets the stage for the rest of the conversation because I couldn't agree with you more. And I truly believe PPHS is one of the schools that you're referring to. I also just want to make a point that I think you're so right. Your quote that no successful future is without the success of our children and the next generation. And, you know, I think finally policymakers at the federal and state level are starting to realize that. They're like, hey, you know, we have all of these exciting new opportunities and careers and jobs across different talent levels, across different industry issue areas, yet we need a pipeline to fill them. And we really need to focus on our young people and get them excited and get them passionate about the different areas that are most attractive to them. So I really appreciate that point. And I think that's a key theme that we should keep throughout the rest of the conversation. I think that's a perfect transition. Thank you again, Jo. Keeanna, I'm going to pass to you next. You were announced as the new CEO of Purdue Polytechnic High School. Congratulations. We are so thrilled for you, and it is much deserved. But you've been involved with the school for a long time, even before that. Can you speak to the history of the school, why it was started, and PPHS's unique model? And lastly, how is this model, similar to what Jo was mentioning, really expanding opportunity for students and young people in your community? And what's the impact that you're seeing? I know that was a lot in one, but I think it hopefully all flows together well.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk about the history of Purdue Polytechnic High Schools, and also so honored to be here with the godfather, Dr. Bertoline, to add richness to this conversation, as well as Raina, an incredible student. But when we look at PPHS, it was really to solve a problem, and it was the unacceptable low number of underrepresented students, who are speaking women, students of color, specifically Black and Latino students, not having access to great post-secondary opportunities. And what I absolutely love about what Purdue did and its founders is, instead of pointing the finger at the K-12 system and said, do better, they said, we're going to get involved. We're going to create in partnership a high school that will exist to increase the pathway of students to post-secondary success. And I will say, Purdue has just been incredible. And I'm not just saying that because as a biased alum, proud alum of Purdue University, but I know how life-changing Purdue was for me, and helping students get that pathway is just unbelievably powerful and just has been incredible. And so we also understood that there are systems in this country that are set up for certain populations to fail. So we also understood that if we wanted different results, we'd have to do it differently. So we really just sought out to reinvent the high school model. We do project-based learning, but we are a truly learner-centered model that elevates the voice and choice of not only our students, but our families and our communities. When we look, we really want our kids to become passionate about solving the problems that mean the most to them and mean the most to their communities. And one of the things that's really important to me and the other leaders at our school is that we are not the experts on solving problems that affect other people, but we engage with the community. We always say we're a school without walls, not because we don't literally have them, because we have walls, because we're in the Midwest, specifically in Indiana, where you never know if it's going to rain, shine, or do all three things on the same day. But what we mean by that is we have the community coming in and supporting our kids, and the other way around, our students really find ways to engage in the community in a meaningful way. And so one of the things that from a model perspective that we notice often got in the way of really good innovation and learning, because we understand that learning is not time bound, and we don't want to limit the learning process, because learning is a process and it should be fun. And so we threw out the master schedule in exchange for something that really allows students that voice and choice. And one of the other things I often like to say about our program is we allow students to work with the curriculum and approach teaching and learning from an integrated process. So in the workforce, most of us don't go and have our math time of the day, or ELA. Oh, it's lunchtime, I have to stop. Now it's time to do choir. We really believe in that integration, so that students, when they go on to other opportunities outside of school, they really know how to integrate. And we also are preparing students for the future of work. We don't know what that future looks like. The jobs that exist now, I would have never dreamed of those as a child, but we strongly believe that if we teach students to collaborate, innovate, and communicate, they'll be successful regardless of what the future of work looks like. We really focus on building that sense of belonging for students. As a school leader, I tell our parents, I find it such a privilege that I could just spend my day with your kids, and I don't take that blessing lightly. So I'm going to make sure that that school really is a good place where kids want to come and they want to learn. And we see when those tweaks that we've made to the model to really build that sense of belonging and to educate the whole child, not just the academics, but making sure they have the social, emotional learning and support to make sure they have access to healthy food, exercise, all the things that we know create a well-balanced human. We want to make sure that those things are present for our students. We believe deeply in advancing equity through innovation. We want to make sure we're on the cutting edge of the absolute best we know in teaching and learning. We like to use research-based practices. Now, when you talk about outcomes, we don't measure success just by test scores or by measures at the end of high school, but we measure it by what happens next. Are students happy? That deeply matters. Are they finding their passion? Are they finding social mobility? One of the big metrics of if a student are they able to set out for a goal and realize those hopes and dreams? And one of the blessings of working with Purdue University is we get really good real-time feedback on how our students are doing. So we work very closely with the university to track what's going on there. But then one of the questions you asked was like, what success are we seeing? And we have just really increased the number of students from underrepresented groups who are at Purdue University right now. Well, maybe not because they're off for summer break, but who are currently attending the university and just really enjoying an opportunity. I could brag for days about our students because I just take this work so personally. It means so much to me. But I would say one of the student stories that I love to hear is she came to our school, didn't have aspirations of going to college, but she came and she's like, wait, Purdue is a place for me. And to hear a woman of color say something like that, and she's now thriving at my university, is just all the blessings in the world. And I'm just so thrilled for this conversation. I am thrilled that there are schools who are getting attention, who are centering the student and really understanding. One of the terms we also say too is we believe that every student has a superpower, and it's our job as educators to really help them hone in on that and what that is. And so I just love everything that Jo said and just feel so much alignment there. And I'm just really excited to continue our work and expand it.
Thanks, Keeanna. That's great. And I really love what you said around advancing equity through innovation. I think that is such a key point. And your quote at the end too, believing in every student having a superpower. I feel like, again, some themes that we should take throughout this conversation today. I also love that you spoke to the holistic student experience. And I think what a better transition than to go to a student themselves. So Raina, I'm going to head to you next. A rising junior, very excited for you. But you're also doing so much more than just being a student. I know you have an internship with Heritage Group among many other extracurricular activities, even based on just looking at your LinkedIn, which I am very impressed by because at your age, I did not even know what LinkedIn was. So you are way ahead of the game, but I think it's just wonderful to see how involved you are in your school and community. Can you speak to your personal experience at PPHS and how you've benefited from the school's approach to education?
Absolutely. Just being a PPHS student, and I'll say a techie, it's just an amazing experience. And as everyone on this chat has been talking about, we just take a bet on students who we know have historically not been represented in investing in, education. And walking through PPHS, it's just impossible to just want to put your head down and not invest in your school. And when I say invest in our school, I'm talking about students too. One of the amazing things that I've been able to work on at PPHS is involved in education is teaching. I sat down with a group of students in my school, and as good friends, we were talking about our experience at PPHS and what we want to invest in our school. And we have a teacher shortage. So we said, why don't we teach a class? We know our students best because we're students ourselves. So we spent 6 weeks with the help of our educators in front of a whiteboard, deciding how we can innovate the education that we're receiving. And one of the things at the time was the industry project, which we had, and it was connecting us with industry partners of our school, big companies and community members who are wanting to invest in us. And we wanted to innovate this process because, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic did really slow down how education looked like in schools. So for 6 weeks, we just innovated on how we can better this process, not only for us, but our fellow classmates. And we started class. And when I'm talking about this, it seems quite literally like it's made up. I mean, how can a group of students ever teach a class in a school? And that's the stories coming out of PPHS every day. Speaking of my LinkedIn account, PPHS had a class on professional development. And one of the things in that class was, hey, LinkedIn is a great resource, not only to connect with fellow students, but with recruiters, people who are give you internships, people who are willing to connect you to other opportunities. And this class basically showed us how to set up a LinkedIn account. What do you want to put for your education, your experience? I mean, how can we build a resume? And now we're talking about how impressive my LinkedIn account is. And that wouldn't be possible without PPHS because I had absolutely no idea what a LinkedIn account was before that class. And speaking of internships, I am completing my second year of high school and I am completing my 4th internship. And all of those internships have been through PPHS. 2 of my internships have been through the school personally. I was a student reporter reporting for our school blog. I was a communications intern focusing specifically on strategic communications. Transparency is important when we're talking about implementing solutions in our school. And I wanted to make sure that everyone needed to know about the solutions, knew about them. We're talking about students, family members. I mean, I'm coming home. I want to make sure that I and my parents know what's happening in my school. And as a communications intern, I was able to work on that and to make sure that when things are rolling out, everyone knows about them. I entered at an intellectual property law firm, and this was suggested by an educator of mine. Our counselor came up to me one day and said, hey, Raina, I see that you're interested in law and we have this partnership with a law firm and they're taking on 2 interns. Do you want to be one of them? And I said, absolutely. And this is something I never thought I could do, but an educator saw that I would be interested and came up to me and suggested this and, invested in me. And now I'm doing a 3-part rotation at the Heritage Group, all through PPHS. I was giving a school tour where I did not expect that I would ever end up here at an internship, but I was able to connect with people who were willing to me, all because they were walking through the halls of PPHS. I mean, I would just say, if you walk through your school, I mean, the building is just set up for collaboration and investing in people. And it's impossible, whether you're a student, an administrator, or you're just visiting, it's impossible to just walk through and not want to help someone out or suggest ideas or want to better our education or the way our school. And it's just amazing. I mean, speaking of me speaking right now, at this webinar. I mean, it's because someone said, hey, I think you would be a great option to, speak to a group of people who want to learn more about education. And I'm here because of the school that I attend. And from someone who's not a native English speaker, it is not originally from the United States. When I first immigrated here, education looked so differently because traditional schools were not set up to actually invest in me and want to know what I was actually interested in. Going to PPHS, everyone wants to know and everyone wants to connect me with opportunities. So it's just a great school, but it's also a school that makes you want to leave something behind before you ultimately go to your next step, whether that's college or entering the professional field or getting a job or simply coming back to PPHS. And that's maybe an option in the future.
Raina, that was just so powerful. And you're such a motivation, not only just for me, but I bet for other students and peers, as probably Keeanna can speak to as well. I also just loved your point around the teaching piece that you all did, just that motivation of saying like, hey, we see this gap and we want to fill it. I just think that's really powerful too, not only in everything else that you said and all the experiences you've gotten, but the fact that you're willing to do the extra work to help your peers and your staff is very powerful. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I'm going to come back to you in a little bit to talk more about how your internships and work experiences are going.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Gary, I'm going to pass to you next. And I'm using another quote today because this quote I really liked, but Gary's said before that to keep pace with our changing economy, education must transform to a 4.0. Which I really like that. But instead, we're currently operating at a 2.0. So how is PPHS helping to drive this transformation in K-12 education? how is this model preparing students for post-secondary education, but also in-demand careers of today, but as we've spoken about in this webinar, also of careers of tomorrow and the future of work coming.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation too. I love talking about this school. And so first of all, I wanted to say that when we started thinking about developing the school, it was around the ideas that Jo really talked about. I've been in education. I started out as a K through 12 educator. I did that for 7 or 8 years while I was working on graduate studies. Then I've been in higher ed for quite a while. I've been in higher ed at 3 different universities. They all have said that they want to do more to diversify their student body. And I'm gonna just be really frank here. The execution of that has been awful. I did a presentation last week at a conference, and you can see the statistics of how little we've been able to do in the last 50 or 60 years. And the problem is that the system that we're using is flawed. We are in what I call a 2.0. I'm going to be generous and call it 2.5, and I'll explain what that means. But we're living in a 4.0 world. So let me quickly give you a little history lesson here. The first industrial revolution, so that's 1.0. You've heard about it probably in England, and steam engine and railroads and things of that nature. The second industrial revolution started in the late 1800s, and that had things like the internal combustion engine, electricity, sanitation, really propelled us forward. But what happened in this nation is they saw that, wow, our education system really wasn't helping us to advance in the industry 2.0 or the second industrial revolution. And so there was a big effort to create a K through 12 school system as well as a higher education system. And so if you look at about 90% of everything that we do in education, whether that's K through 12 or higher ed, it's based on decisions that were made around 1900 plus or minus 20 years. For example, the credit hour was created in 1906, okay? And what you have to understand is the education system that was created at that time was to take farmers and shopkeepers and prepare them to work in factories and offices, okay? We're way beyond that as far as our needs, and the sophistication of the work that's needed is well beyond what we were doing in 1900. So you just have to think about what the world was like in 1900 versus what we have today. And then industry 3.0 is computing, basically. And a lot of people think, well, computing revolutionized the world in very profound ways, and they think that's still occurring. Well, actually, computing just got us to the point where we could automate a few things, okay? This revolution, 4.0, which is now you're getting into artificial intelligence and data and Internet of Things, we're all connected. For the first time in human history, the machines are smarter than the people. And you're seeing a lot around Chat GPT right now. I mean, there's some fluff in that, but there's some real sobering things. The Beatles just released a new record. I don't know if you heard about this, okay? Just yesterday, I think it was based on AI. They used AI to create their last record. All right. And people are freaking out about those kinds of things. So the world has fundamentally changed, and Industry 4.0 is so much greater than the preceding 3. And we haven't caught up to that. And so when I say we're in 2.5, is we added some computers, okay, to our curriculum and done some things around the edges, but we haven't really transformed education. And so doing things like getting rid of the credit hour and doing competency-based, okay? What have you learned? Show me what you've learned. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a test. Do an internship, and how successful are you when you do that? Working in teams is the way the world works, yet we still grade everyone individually. And fear of failure. I like to use the idea that you're not failing, even in school, when you're doing projects, whatever, you're falling down and you're getting back up. This resiliency that you build into the learning system, okay? Because, those kinds of things happen in life. but it's knowing that it's not failure in the sense that you as a personal is failure, because that's a very, very negative kind of thing that you put on the kids. So it's a whole mindset that needs to be changed. And that's what we need to do, is we have to fundamentally change the learning system that we have, and it has to be around 4.0. There's a lot more that needs to be done. We can do a lot more if we embrace artificial intelligence in the support of teaching and learning, so that we can take some of the drudgery out of teaching and learning, and the teachers, who we call coaches, by the way, which I think is the right thing to say, all right? Our coaches can focus in on the human element, okay? The one-on-one interactions, the one-on small group interactions, because that's where real learning occurs. In those kinds of things. And so the factory model where you have 30 kids sitting in rows just doesn't work, okay? And that was what we tried to do. I also need to add one more thing very quickly in case you're confused, because we have the Purdue name attached to it. It was this high school was never meant to be what some people refer to as a college prep. We take all students. It's a public, okay, charter school. We have students that do not go on to college, and that's okay. But what we hope we've done is we prepared them to make living wages. They can actually go out and get into some high-tech jobs at a lower level within the organization, but they also feel like they can learn. And so when they are asked to learn more, or the job changes a little bit, they would do that. One of the things I do a lot in workforce education, a lot of the fear that the current workforce has is they don't believe they can learn, because they went through this antiquated learning system that took out their confidence in learning. And that's one of the reasons they actually don't take training, even if it's offered to them. They don't want to be embarrassed because they actually think they can't learn. We have to get that out of the school system. And those are some of the things that we've tried to do in order to better prepare our graduates for this unknown world, because it is very, very unpredictable. So how do you prepare, students for jobs that don't exist? That's a challenge. That's what we're trying to do.
Gary, I'm so happy you provided a little more also just information too about the model of PPHS itself. I think it's a really important distinction there, that of course college is exciting and important path, but if students choose that that's not the option for them, there are other ways that PPHS is ensuring their preparedness in the future. I also love your point around resiliency, and Keeanna, it goes back to something you said about problem solving. There was a recent report from the World Economic Forum that interviewed over 800 employers across the globe. And what they said was the skill they are looking for, regardless of these transitions in work, is problem solving. So for the fact that, I think that's just such an embedded piece to this school's model, and I think that's going to remain very important. So I just wanted to double down that point and say that I appreciate you both for raising that. And I think that is unique to PPHS that we should be elevating. Marianne, this is there was a question in the chat which I think really resonates with the question I'm about to go to you, and also TJ, who asked it in the chat, to our questions for the rest of the webinar, which is really around transformation, scale, replication. How can we see this happen in other places? And Marianne, I'm going to you with this because you have been in public policy for some time now, being a leader, whether it's your background on the school board as well as serving in Indiana's legislature. Can you speak to this role and how you work to expand models like PPHS during your time in those positions? Have you seen momentum even when you were there, but also since you've stepped outside? And what are some of the persisting challenges in building policymaker and public buy-in around this?
Yes. Well, thank you so much again for inviting me to participate today. And I get chills when I hear kind of what actually happens when policy works. So it's all theoretical, it's all ideological until somebody opens a school that changes lives in the way that Raina's life is being changed, and thousands of other kids. So and PPHS is one of the examples of the type of innovative programs that you hope you facilitate ever coming to be when you create policies that get out of the way of innovation. And I think that's the the biggest problem is that we have built structures that get in the way of progress. You know, policymakers are pretty darn fickle folks. You know, politics and policy are not one and the same thing. In order to continue to create policy, you usually have to stay in office. So you're walking this nice balance between you know, the transformational work you want to do and actually being in a position where you can still do it. So momentum shifts, and you got to know that going in. So for example, if you're doing policy at the state level, it tends to be a slower process to realize, you know, the end result. If you go back, it's an iterative process. Usually you take maybe multiple times in front of the legislature before you actually get something through. Districts can move really fast, but the district system can also undo what you do really fast. So I think one of the really important things for people who want to do this work at the local level and translate it there is to work with a sense of urgency, but focus on a sustainability. Because if you're in a system that has been built over generations for completely different purposes, it is so hard to take that down and erect something different. But you also have the knowledge that if you build it strong enough, it's going to take somebody else a really long time to tear it down too. So schools like PPHS are like building the case for the sustainability of this system, a system where schools are free to look at the school as a unit of change, drive decision-making as much as possible to the school level so that students and the educators there are like actually where things are happening. And the bigger system only exists to support their work. There's no other reason for a school district to exist than to support students and the educators in their buildings. That's it, period. And a lot of people just still struggle with that because, you know, we like to go back. It's tough to change. And we go back to the things we're comfortable with, even if they're not in our best interest.
Marian, I'm literally getting that quote, sense of urgency, but work on sustainability, like printed in my office, because I think that is like such a great mindset for anyone who's interested in policy at all at the local, state, or federal level. It's like you need to be passionate and work towards it, but also understand that you want it to be embedded and entrenched in a good way, especially when it is good policy like PPHS. Marian, I'm going to come back to you to talk more in a bit too on this, because I think it's really important. Before we move on to our next question, we're going to do a quick poll for the audience. You know, Marian just kind of talked about some of the more political element of this conversation. So do you think political leaders in your local area or policymakers in your state or even at the federal level understand the value of education reform? And just a yes or no. And we'll get back to that in a second after I ask this question. So my next question is going to be a group. So panelists, you know, we'll just, whoever wants to start will be a collaborative answer. But I want to ask about partnerships. Again, a question came up in the chat about this around how you're partnering to kind of go back to the sustainability point to ensure this program and school remains vital. So Gary, Raina, and Keeanna, PPHS partners intensively with, of course, like we mentioned, Purdue University, but also employers to build career and experiences for their students. Gary, can you speak more to the higher education partnership and the key role Purdue plays? And I know you mentioned earlier, but the need to like expand these types of partnerships across the country. Raina, I would love for you to talk more about the employer side and how you've been paired and worked with local employers in your area. And then Keeanna, anything to add as we go through in the conversation, but just really want to hear more about how PPHS is working with other key sectors and partners in the community.
Yes, Purdue believes that they have a stake in K through 12 education. I mean, you know, it's the output of K through 12 that ends up the input of Purdue University. And if we don't assist in some way and collaborate, I don't know how you kind of break the cycle that we've had. And I've explained it earlier through the data. If you look at it, we really are not making much progress. And so Purdue is taken on, really, this is a highly risky thing. Purdue, values its brand. This is actually an arm's length relationship. The school actually is a 501c3. So we work collaboratively. We have a service agreement that we went through. We helped them start the school. I was asked by Purdue University to lead this initiative, hired the first school leader. And, I serve on the school board. So, but even the school board, the majority cannot be Purdue people. Okay. They have to be from the community, and that it was done that way. Purdue University could have chartered the school. We chose not to. We went to another chartering agency to show, again, that arm's length relationship, because we think that if we can make this work in kind of a neutral environment, that it can be expanded and grown more. And so, we've already expanded another school in the near north side of Indianapolis. There's one in South Bend. We're talking about opening another one in Indianapolis. We're looking at how we can partner with existing school districts and carving out a piece of their curriculum so that some of their students could take this as a pathway. We're getting national attention. We're actually getting international attention, okay? That people want to take a hard look at this. And we don't claim to have all the answers, by the way. This is one way of going forward, but we think it fits the model that Jo kind of described at the beginning, which I believe is where we need to start moving, but there's different pathways. And I think if there's one thing that I'm really optimistic about, if we can start making progress in this area, is that, as I was explaining, historically, K through 12 was created where one size fits all. I don't believe that's the answer going forward. There has to be multiple options, and Purdue has one option. We don't claim it's the right option, but we are trying very, very hard to work with the K through 12 school, PPHS, to see how we can improve this and get better. We don't have all the answers yet. We have things we need to improve on, but we've made great, great progress. And Purdue is committed to this partnership and what we can do.
I love that, Gary, and I love that neutral environment piece. I think that's really interesting, and that's something, again, that when there are those higher ed partners in the way that you all are operating, you don't always see that. So that's a really powerful point. Raina, I'm going to pass to you just to speak more to some of the employer partnerships and your work to date.
Absolutely. I think one of the kind of just biggest advantages I have as a student at PPHS is that I'm not just gaining an education, I'm getting a head start to where I'm going to end up 20 years from now. And I'm getting to work who have been in their careers for years, and I'm able to actually have a stake in the conversation and not just be a student in the corner. And right now in my internship, I'm interning with mostly college students, and I'm able to, walk in, and as a high school student, I'm able to have a stake in the conversation, work on projects that they would work on. And this is all possible because we have immense partnerships in our communities and statewide with employers who are willing to take on students like me and my classmates. And going the partnership with the law firm in downtown Indy, not only do they take on 2 students from our schools each summer, they have a scholarship partnership with our school, and a student each year gets to have a scholarship from this law firm to pursue a STEM degree in Indiana. I mean, this is just an example of how our school makes sure that, yes, you're thriving in high school on the education that you gain from our schools. And I think that's the most important thing. And obviously, not only partnerships externally, but internally, our school rolls out internships every year. I had 2 internships at our school, but right now, 2 of my classmates are interning with our school to work on the curriculum that I'm going to be using to gain my education. And when I'm doing so, I can say, hey, 2 of my friends worked on this. This is the coolest thing ever. And I think that's just an example of how we can make sure that students are not only getting an education, but also getting a head start. So super awesome being a student at PPHS.
Raina, that's such a good point. I love your point around being like part of the conversation and building that skill set. I think something we see often is that young people don't have access to some of the social capital that comes with internships and having that work-based learning. And it's clear that you have not only established that with your employer, but also through your peer networks and even friends and other scholars. So I think that's just a really important point. I appreciate you talking about that. Keeanna, just anything you'd want to add before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, not much to add here, but one thing I like to talk about in partnerships is share that a lot of times other schools come to us and say, how do you get these partners to work with you? And it's no big secret. If you get students who have voice and choice, they're more likely to engage in a meaningful way with the partners. I mean, Raina's passion is so clear. And y'all, I am the most blessed woman in the world. I get to spend my time with people like with Raina, literally, and other students. So I just consider myself so blessed to do this work. But I think it's also making sure that partners come in knowing that they can either engage in projects, they can mentor a student, but they know that they're going to be matched with a student who shares a similar passion. And I think that's really important. I was going to add the piece about social capital because many of the students we work with would not have access to internships. Some do, but not all. So I think that's a really important piece that you brought out, Taylor. That was incredible. And I think one of the really important things is we are very intentional that our partners must reflect our student population. So if you walk into a boardroom and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm the only woman in the space, or I'm the only Black person in this space, that sends a message. So we're really transparent about our need to see everyone represented, everyone reflected, and not just in stereotypical roles, but in the C-suite. So that's one of the things we hold ourselves accountable to, as well as our partners. But we've just been incredibly blessed. But I think this is what I always tell people: make sure that you're giving your partner something meaningful to work with.
So Taylor, I'd also add that partnerships, are great for all of the reasons that you've just stated. They're also politically great because you create allies politically for those sure to come down the road times when people will want to do something else with resources rather than what they're doing with you. So the broader your networks and the deeper the relationships, the more you shore up your political support in the community.
Marian, that's actually a really great segue. I'm going to have the poll results show up really quick, and then I'm going to transition to our next question. But as those are coming up, we've had some questions. So majority, but not horrible. Some people said yes, which is good, but majority is that policymakers and politicians maybe still do not understand the value of this reform agenda and effort. And I think, again, a great segue to our next question. I will just flag a couple things in the chat that as we do our final two questions of our webinar, if people could weave them into their responses, that would be great. One is around resources, which I think you just mentioned it, Marian, it's key. And I think as we talk about the next question around replication and scale, that will come up across our panelists. And then the other, Gary, which I might punt to you for the last question, is around this credit versus competency, and how do we change that policy-wise at the national and state level. So just keep those in your mind as we move forward from our audience today. So second to last question, Keeanna, Marian, and Jo. Keeanna, I'm just going to start with you first. I know you just had the mic, but hopefully that's okay. We've been talking a lot today about how unique this school is. How can we continue to build awareness about PPHS? Gary, I think you said it well. While it might not be the answer for everyone, it's clear that it could and should be replicated in some places where it might be the solution. So how do we see that replication happen and see real scale in some of these innovative approaches that other Americans across the country can benefit from? Keeanna, I want to start with you because, like Gary mentioned, there's been some expansion of this model across the state of Indiana and in South Bend and other places, but I also know you're really committed to also thinking about rural communities. So would love for you to touch on that. Marian, again, politics going to you from your expertise of working within these systems, but how can we really push for innovation and change amidst a slower moving political landscape? I think you hit on that in your first response, but we know local can be more rapid, state can be longer, federal is even longer. So how do we operate within that while also knowing we need to manage things quickly? And then Jo, last thing, we'll just go to you to talk more about some other models that you're seeing and innovations that audience members might be interested to know before we go to our final question. So I know that was a lot in one, but I think it's an important things to talk about today. So Keeanna, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so when we talk about expansion, one thing I always want to bring up is that it's important to expand both quality and quantity. You can't have one without the other. And I also find that there's aspects of our model that we are that we want to share with others, because we really do believe in the power of a student-centered learning environment. And our goal is not to have, expand schools across the country or across, we are a land grant university and committed to Indiana. But one of the things that's really important that are not talked about enough are the number of rural schools and communities who do not have great access to high quality STEM focused education. Now, we hear a lot about this talked in the urban core, and there's programming that exists. So one of our passion projects is seeing how we can partner with some rural school districts here in Indiana to support high levels of access to high quality curriculum and teaching and learning. So we're really excited about those initiatives. Another avenue that we're really excited about exploring is the micro school model, which allows for, so it's still the same high quality instruction, project-based learning, student voice and choice that you see in our schools, but it really scales down the model to allow for even more student-centered learning, smaller class sizes, but it makes scaling more manageable, because honestly, I know there's a question about funding, and that can be one of the things that makes scale really difficult. And I would just encourage, we want to work with people. We believe deeply in what we're doing. And I know for me, I don't just care about my kids at PPHS. I care about Indianapolis. I care about this country that I love. And I think one of the things that you can do when you love a country, you can recognize systems that are not working. And I'm a disruptor in that way. And I always say I disrupt with a smile on my face. But some things need to be disrupted. So we're just really excited about getting more partnership there. And I don't think that every school needs to be a Purdue Polytechnic High School, but I do think that every school should adopt the philosophy of being truly student-centered. And then I just want more conversations about how can we support rural schools. And then one of the things we're seeing, especially in Indiana, is, and I'm so excited, we're seeing an increased number of immigrants coming in, specifically coming to rural communities, but the lack of support to help an English language learner, which is, I was an ELL teacher for a long time, so huge passion of mine. I have a lot of passions, but this is a model that isn't just for the urban core, but something that works really well in rural communities that are seeing some population shifts, but are often not centered in these conversations.
Thanks, Keeanna. Another quote that I'm getting printed in my office, disruption with a smile on. I think that is amazing. So thank you. Marianne, going to go to you next.
Yeah, so remind me again, the specific of
I know I gave you so much.
No, sorry.
No, Mary, no, it's fine. I was going to ask you, as you mentioned earlier, that sometimes policymaking can take more time, yet we know the rate of change is happening more quickly than policy might. So how do we operate within that kind of political environment, if there's any recommendations for audience members today?
Right. Yeah. Well, so definitely, if you're doing transformation, big transformation, you can't leave anyone behind. But that's a massive challenge because you're moving fast, right? So that means you have to communicate fast. And you're typically communicating really difficult, complex, nuanced ideas. So, gee, that sounds like fun. But that's why it's so important to acknowledge that reality and make that part of your strategy and everything you do. So like, how do we get parents to understand in their heart what we're doing for their children? How do we get students to really understand what their opportunities are, why we're fighting for something to be different instead of being satisfied with them doing what their parents got to do or what their friend got to do or whatever. So we have to be humble enough to explain ourselves really well until there is understanding and buy-in. At the same time, you can't wait for it. It's a really, really difficult balance. And if you're always trying, I love a good community meeting. I love a lot of community meetings. I love building consensus. But you know what? Some kid's going to be, 4 years out of school, down the road before you ever make your first actual decision. So, so that's the balance that policymakers have to strike. That's where our advocates need to come in and keep pushing on that and help us tell the stories. And so, Raina, I'm gonna come back at you and see what you're doing, because I think, we need to talk about you running for office, because I think you do a beautiful job of telling the story, but also attaching it to the changes you need to see and that you support. So more policymakers need to come to you for lessons. Sorry.
Yeah, Raina, you might be getting a lot of requests after this. I hope that's okay. Marianne's 100% right. Jo, final thought on this question. Just again, I think Gary hit, the nail on the head that PPHS is, amazing and such an exciting model. And Keeanna, to your point, there's so many themes that other schools can replicate and use. But Jo, you're also looking at this at a national level. So there are other kind of models and things that are similar that you want to raise up for people today.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple different things that come to mind. Right here in New York City, we have something called the Harbor School, which is on Governor's Island. I had a chance to visit them last week on the day the city was covered by a toxic plume from Canada. That was the day I was out there on a ferry headed to Governor's Island. But anyway, they have a really amazing program. It's maritime focused. Again, I'm going to talk about Harbor School and I'm going to talk about Gotham Tech, but with both of them have an open enrollment. So rather than having to have test scores to get in, they're open to all kids with an interest, which I think is number one important thing. Let's not put more barriers for children to have to overcome. So the cool thing about the Harbor program is very practical. So you come in, you learn about a lot of maritime stuff. Everyone says, I want to be a marine biologist, but there's numerous different types of things you can do with the water. And so they have 8 different concentrations. Kids get certifications in diving. I mean, who gets that? Professional diving is something you can walk out of there with the certification. They go around with the Coast Guard to do search and rescue. They do ocean engineering, marine policy and advocacy for those who want to maybe not be on the water, but want to be, arguing for better environmental policies. I think that's pretty remarkable. And the other is Gotham Tech, which is located on Roosevelt Island. It's relatively new. And basically they focus on robotics. So for the moment you walk in, you're helping build a robot that does all these different tasks. And the neat thing about that, again, open to all kids who just have an interest in robotics. And what the kids find out is, some of us really love the engineering behind it. Some of us love the design behind it. Some of us love the fundraising. We love the social media aspect of it. We love this and that. So it's really neat to see. You don't have to be headed off to a brilliant engineering program like Purdue's to be in a program like that. There's a place for everybody, in something like Gotham Tech. The other thing in terms that leans more toward an equity and inclusion, but I think is really important, more important than really almost any other thing, Dallas ISD recently moved from an opt-in, to an opt-out program for honors programming. So that means prior to that, you had to have a recommendation of a teacher or a parent to enter an honors program. Now, based upon test scores, you're automatically put into that program unless a teacher or parent, well, not a teacher, but a parent, you have to get parent permission to be removed. So you can imagine what that did. It greatly expanded students who are Black, students who are Hispanic, English language learners. I mean, it's Dallas, so we're close to the border, a diverse student population, which now has access to honors programming across the board in numerous subjects. That is really critical. So I think, the specialization schools are one thing and they're fantastic. And when they're open to everybody without barriers, that is a remarkable and amazing thing. And the other thing for big school districts that probably aren't going to have a specialty like that, but to remove those barriers and recognize the talent of an enormous swath of children is really, I think, the most important thing we all should be doing.
Jo, I love that. You summarized that so well. And I know we have 1 minute left, but I want to do rapid fire questions for all of my panelists before we close today. Also, audience, if we didn't get to your question in the chat, I'm sorry. There's just so much I want to ask these wonderful leaders, but promise that they'll be available for follow-up, and please reach out with any additional questions you have. Okay, final thoughts of today that you want to leave the audience with. Including a point that may have not been covered that you want to lift up, or also just a policy idea or recommendation to people that are trying to think about this at the local, state, and federal level. Jo, I'm just going to start back with you if you don't mind being in the hot seat.
I just think I cannot succeed until we all succeed. No matter what I have done professionally, personally, in my journalism career, I cannot succeed unless that door is opened wide for every child to come through, that we don't even have a door anymore. There's no building anymore. It's an open field and we're all there. That's when I will succeed.
Thanks, Joe. Mary Ann, going to you next.
Yeah, just anything is possible. Push, push, push hard. Don't take no for an answer. Anybody that gets it done doesn't. Is that too many negatives? I don't know. But it really happens, and it can work. And this is evidence, that you can work on something for 10 years and it comes to fruition. So don't be discouraged, keep going, and support leaders who have ambitious goals, please.
I love that point. Raina, I'm going to go to you next.
Sure. I mean, students are the leaders of tomorrow, and they
Oh no, I think we lost Raina. We'll go back to her. Gary, can I go to you next?
take on our role,
Oh,
and
yeah.
as a person, I knew things she could do, and now being able to do that is just extraordinary. And I think having leaders like Dr. Warren and Gary, who are specifically dedicating their careers to making sure that students like me have an opportunity, is just amazing. And I hope we see more leaders like that. And I'm pretty sure I'm walking the halls with students who are going to be those leaders.
Well, Raina, we can't wait to see all you accomplish, and thank you for being that leader of the future. Gary, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, so in my career, I've been around the block a little bit, and I think Keeanna heard me say this before. The most rewarding thing I've ever done was helping the startup of this school. The payoff is tremendous. It's a lot of work, but just listen to Raina. It is so gratifying to hear that. It is worth the effort, but you have to take some risk and go for it. And we're here to help. And just let us know. We can help.
Thanks, Gary. And then Keeanna, final words for us today.
Just two things: listen to students, listen to communities, and in a world where you can be that toe the line leader, be a Dr. Gary Bertoline.
Well, you all have been so inspiring for me today. Again, I have so many quotes now I'm going to use throughout my career in life to inspire me. And then I hope others listening in were able to learn some exciting things and that they can use in their career and to elevate and continue to grow these types of models across our country. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you.